Okay, so back to the PPT. So today I will be talking about how English use is changing in our globalized society and what this means for non-native teachers and learners and resources that we can use to meet our language learning needs, but also to help our students meet their language learning needs. So as I said, I'll be asking you guys to participate and give your opinions throughout. Okay, so I'll be asking you guys some questions. So if you guys can volunteer your opinions, that would be great. So you can just turn on your microphone and say what you think, or you can also type in the chat bar if you prefer. Okay, so the globalization of English. So out of the world's 7.8 billion inhabitants, of all the people that live in the world, it's estimated that between 1.3 billion and 2 billion people now speak English. So I'm just going to put my microphone in because there's a little bit of background noise, or I'm going to put my earphones in, sorry. So out of these people, my question is, how many of these speak English as their first language? So I would like you guys to share your opinion. So out of the almost 2 billion people in the world who speak English, so the estimate is between 1.3 and 2 billion people. So linguists aren't exactly sure how many people speak English, but how many of these people do you think speak English as their first language? So when I say first language, I'm talking about, for example, countries such as Canada, Australia, Ireland, where I'm from, South Africa. How many people do you think speak English as their first language? So who would like to shout out and volunteer their answer? Or you can also type it in the chat bar. Okay, so let's see. So maybe 30%. Okay, so yeah, I'm recording the lecture at the moment. Yeah, so maybe 30% says Sunghae. Okay, interesting. Would anyone else like to volunteer their opinions? So 30% of people in the world speak English as their first language. Does anybody else have a different idea?
10%.
10%. Ji Young says 3%. Okay, you guys all have very different ideas. What about Sukyung? Sukyung, you're smiling. What do you think? How many people or what percentage speak English as their first language?
I have no idea, but I think maybe 20%.
Maybe 20%? Okay. And Ariane says maybe 15%? Okay. So let's see. You guys have very different opinions about this. So the answer is around 360 million people. So that means that out of maybe 1.3 billion to 2 billion people who speak English, only about 360 million of these people are first language speakers like me. Okay, so what does that mean? It means that native, guys, is there a little echo with my earphone, or is it okay? Is it echoing a little bit? I'm not sure. I'll take my earphones out just in case. So that means native speakers much outweigh native speakers in the world right now. So then the question is, who owns English? So since non-native speakers now outweigh native speakers by at least 3 to 1, who owns English? Nobody. So English is everybody's language. In one country or in one culture. So guys, if
왜 이게 안 꺼지지?
moment, press mute because
이게 줌이 안 꺼져. 저 컴퓨터 안 됐어. 로그아웃 했는데도 안
press the mute button when you're not talking just to avoid any.
껐는데도 안 꺼져.
줌이 어딨어?
몰라 보이지도 않고.
So I'll just say it one more time. If someone has their microphone on at the moment, please make sure the microphone is switched off, okay?
녹이 돼 있잖아.
비우세요.
I'm not sure who it is.
소리 너무.
줌이 어딨어?
Okay, everyone please mute your microphones right now. Okay, so then back to the PPT. This brings us to what we call the native speaker fallacy. So fallacy means some kind of myth. So unfortunately, a fallacy still exists that English belongs to those who speak it as their mother tongue. So this is a very common myth that so many people believe in the world right now. Okay, so the native speaker fallacy, which is a term that was made by a linguist called Philipson in 1992, suggests that first of all, native speaker English is the ideal model of English, and it's a model that should be imitated by learners. So a lot of learners, I guess, subscribe to this fallacy and believe that they should be learning a native speaker form of English, for example, American English and British English. It also means that native speaking English teachers have the greatest knowledge of English and the highest level of expertise in teaching it. So this fallacy, this myth, promotes the idea that learners should be learning native speaker English and that the person who should be teaching English is a native speaker. So the reason Philipson called this a fallacy was because, of course, this is not true. So a lot of linguists these days are debating this fallacy, but the sad reality is that this ideology has become so ingrained that people are often actually unaware of the presence of it and the impact. So for example, in Korea, a lot of students, a lot of recruiters will want, for example, an American teacher, because that is just ingrained in them, that a native speaker and often a speaker from a certain country is the best form of teacher and the model that they should be copying, but it is not actually true. So that's what we are going to be talking about today. So this native speaker fallacy creates a lot of issues for both non-native speaker teachers and also for our students. So I'm going to talk about some of the problems that this creates. So why is it problematic? First, when we view, so I'm going to use NS as an abbreviation for native speaker. So when we view the native speaker as the target model of English, we are comparing native speakers and second language speakers like you guys. But this is an unfair comparison because no matter how proficient a second language speaker becomes in English, they will never be a native speaker because English is simply not their mother tongue. So it's illogical to compare a native speaker to one of you guys, because even if you become perfect at English, you will never be a native speaker. So it's a comparison that is very problematic and it creates a lot of issues. So first of all, as you guys are probably very aware, it creates a lot of problems for non-native speaking English teachers. So what kind of problems does it create? So first of all, studies have shown that it can create decreased self-confidence in non-native speaker teachers' professional identity. So non-native speaker teachers often accept this superiority, which I've put in quotation marks, of native speaker teachers. So there is no superiority of native speaker teachers, but sometimes non-native speakers think, oh, native speakers are better. And this can lead to them doubting their own competence and own legitimacy as teachers. So it's very harmful for the confidence of professional non-native speaking teachers. As well as that, it creates a lot of discrimination in the English language teaching industry. So sometimes the professionalism of non-native speaker teachers is questioned, and often they have less job opportunities and earn less money. So I'm going to show you here an example of this. Is a screenshot taken from Craigslist, which is a popular website for recruiting teachers in South Korea. And you can see how common you see the word native when they are trying to find English teachers. And of course, in Korea, there is a law that if you are a foreigner and want to teach English in this country, you must be from a native English speaking country. So no matter how fluent you are in English, if you are from a country, for example, Sweden, or if you are from maybe Nigeria, if you are from India and you speak English extremely well, you still cannot get a visa to teach English in South Korea. So it creates a big problem and a lot of discrimination in the English language teaching industry. So these are two of the main problems that the native speaker fallacy creates for non-native speaking teachers. It also creates so many problems for our students. Okay, so for learners of English, the first problem is linguistic insecurity. So it's extremely difficult to speak like a native speaker. So it's almost impossible to get to this level. So this can cause students to become ashamed of their English skills, especially their pronunciation. And I find that this is extremely true in Korea. So Korea is the first country that I came to where people apologized to me for their English. And they would say, oh, I'm sorry, my English isn't good, or I'm sorry, my accent isn't native. And I would say, I'm in your country. Why are you apologizing to me? So in countries like Korea, this creates a lot of linguistic insecurity. So 1 second, guys, I'm just going to, I think some people are trying to join the chat room. So I'm just going to stop sharing and no, we're good. Okay, great. So this causes a lot of issues in terms of linguistic insecurity. The next is decreased motivation. So when learners expect to become perfect speakers, it often leads to frustration and disappointment when they don't get to that level. And this can also decrease their motivation. So for a lot of my students who come to me wanting to speak like a native, I find that their motivation dwindles very quickly when they can't reach that goal that is almost unattainable. So it can have very serious problems for learner motivation as well. Another issue is communication difficulties. So when schools rely on native speaker materials and teachers, students often struggle to understand other accents and varieties of English. So this is a big problem, as I said, in Korea, where American and North American teachers are kind of the most favored. So studies have shown that usually Koreans prefer to have a North American teacher. And this means they're using North American teachers, but also North American textbooks. And when Korean people, and this also happens in other countries, when they meet a speaker who doesn't speak American English, it can be very difficult for them to understand what the speaker is saying. So even, for example, I am from Ireland, and when I tell my students that at the beginning of a new class, they're often very stressed because they think, oh, maybe I won't understand her because I'm not used to this accent. So because there's a heavy reliance on native speaker teachers and native speaker materials and textbooks, it means that students often struggle when they hear varieties of English that they are unfamiliar with. So it can cause communication difficulties. Another issue is poor quality of instruction. So when teachers are judged on their mother tongue instead of their ability to teach, often native teachers with no pedagogical training or experience are often hired. So another example is, well, this happens in Korea, it happens in Japan, it happens in many Asian countries and Middle Eastern countries, where teachers are recruited simply because they are native English speakers. So you will see a lot of job advertisements saying no experience required. It doesn't matter what your background is. It doesn't matter what you have studied at university. As long as you speak English, you can teach in our country. So it leads to this issue where there are teachers coming and they're not trained and they're not experienced. They don't know how to handle a classroom. They don't know how to discipline students. They don't know how to explain grammatical concepts. And it becomes a big problem for learners of English, where there are so many non-native speaking teachers who would be much better suited to those roles. So that's another issue that this creates. So this brings us on to the qualities of an ideal English teacher. So as I said, just because someone is a native speaker, it doesn't mean that they're an ideal English teacher. So I would like to hear your thoughts. So for you guys, what are the qualities that you think an ideal English teacher should have? So I would like you guys to type in the chat bar, or you can also turn on your microphone and you can tell us, based on your experience or just from your opinion, what do you think a quality that an English teacher should have is? So please be brave and share your thoughts. I'm looking forward to hearing your opinions. Okay.
I talk about my my experience.
Yes,
Can
great.
I share? Yeah. So I hired native English teacher before.
Mm-hmm.
So he was about 30, and comes from California.
Mm-hmm.
So, but he doesn't like children.
Oh.
Yeah. So,
wow.
So my students quit. A lot of students quit the lesson.
Wow. So the students could see that he didn't like children, right?
Yeah. So usually interest is a very important part for young learners. However, his facial expression is getting darker and darker.
Oh my
in the
gosh.
lesson. So I decided to tell him about this matter. So after he quit my lesson, so many students came back.
Wow. Oh my gosh. So yeah, a lot of people come to countries to teach English and they don't even like children. So it's very bizarre. So I'm glad that you no longer have that teacher. So some of you guys shared empathy, very important. The teacher should have experience in teaching English, great. Being patient, good understanding for both cultures, yes, very important, regardless of the persona. Passion for teaching, very good. Learning language is like establishing identity, so teacher must respect the students. Excellent, very good. So would anyone else like to speak or maybe share their experiences? Perhaps you have worked with a teacher who you felt was lacking in some way, or perhaps you want to share your ideas about what makes a good quality teacher. So is anyone brave enough to shout out?
Well,
yes, great, Sujin. So I think we have a couple of people. So first, Sujin.
Yes. Yeah, I think what you know is doesn't mean you can teach very well. So how to deliver what you know is totally different matter. So I think it's based on my experience, because I think it's very important to how to teach and how to organize the class and make a clear set of the goal of that lesson. So how to organize it and how to deliver what you know is totally different matter.
Exactly.
So
very
of
good.
course, so you need what you really need to know what the student needed. And of course that the relationship is very important. So you have a really full understanding of the student itself. And then I really think I really need the ability to organize my class and each class in a very systematically. I think that's very important.
Exactly.
That's what I think.
Very good. Very important. So delivering your knowledge in an effective way and systematically organizing the class. Yeah, very important.
Exactly.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. And I think someone else was shouting out an answer. So would anyone else like to share their thoughts?
Right. Yeah, it was me. I would just say the first part of your PowerPoint was very touchable. As a non-native English speakers, I had to face it every day, that not being born in the right place. The employers do not trust me. And I would say it's a plus and a minus. Minus because I don't have a lot of opportunities, but at the same time I have to prove myself. I have to prove that I'm better than any native English speakers. So I learned a lot about students. I listened a lot about seniors. So it was a really nice way to me to be I guess a good English teacher.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing, Jonathan. And yeah, it's so true. Simply because of someone's passport, they can be denied certain opportunities and undervalued and questioned as a teacher just because of where you are from. So it's a very unfair and discriminatory industry, to be honest. And some of you guys are sharing in the chat bar as well. So Insan says to finish teaching the English program, okay. And so Nura says, regardless of the person's language background, one should have the knowledge of English language with the teacher training and teacher experience. Yeah, very important. So a lot of teachers who are native English speakers are not required to have any training or experience, which causes a lot of issues. So yeah, you guys gave all of the answers that I was looking for. So in terms of linguistics, some of the things that are considered to make a good English teacher are things like aptitude. So I guess natural ability to teach. So some of it can be learned, but some people are just not really natural teachers. So natural ability is very important. Experience, so important. So when I first became a teacher, I was terrible. I was so bad. So it takes a lot of experience and practice. Personal traits. So some of you guys said things like passion, having a good personality, being able to form good relationships, actually liking students and liking people is very important. Motivation and love of students. So these, I guess, are what linguists would consider to be the main qualities of an ideal English teacher. So English as a first language, this does not make someone the perfect teacher. So very, very important. So my next question then is, so we can have great native speaker teachers and we can have great non-native speaker teachers. So personally, I think that non-native speaker teachers can be much better and bring a lot of advantages to English language teaching. And a lot of linguistics agree with this ideology. So the next question that I would like to ask you guys is, what benefits do non-native English speaking teachers have? So this is time to reflect on yourself and think, even if you're not teaching at the moment, what things do you think that non-native speakers can bring to the table as teachers? What benefits or advantages do they have? So please type your comments in the chat bar, or you can just turn on your microphone and share your ideas. So what benefits do you think non-native speaking teachers have? Don't be shy. So Sujin says same learning experience with the students, very good. So non-native speakers have actually learned the language. They have gone through the same experience as students have. So that's very, very important. Okay, great. So Ji Young says they can easily explain abstract concepts and rules of the language. Yeah, very good. Okay, same cultural experience. Yeah, so culture is very, very important as well. So a lot of teachers who come here have no idea about Korean culture. When I first came, I had no idea. And I found that learning more about the culture has helped me become a better teacher. So same cultural experience is very important. Great. So anyone else? What other benefits do non-native speaker teachers have? You guys should be very proud of yourself if you're speaking English, or sorry, teaching English. So what benefits do you think you have? So Young-hee says to deliver the advantages to learn English. Easy to talk with students' parents. Yeah, that's very important. Great. Anything else? Nobody has been brave enough to turn on their microphone. So I'm not going to put anyone on the spot, but if you would like to share your experiences, that would be great. And why you think that non-native speaker teachers can be very effective. So teachers can expect the errors when they are learning languages. Very important. So you guys have mentioned a lot of the ones that I want to talk about. So first, as one of you had already said, empathy. So non-native speaking teachers have learned English and they can relate to their students' struggles. So it helps to build rapport with the students because you've gone through the same experience as your students have gone through the same struggles. The next one is, as someone else has already said, so Ariane literally just said it, so anticipation of language difficulties. So non-native speaker teachers can predict which areas students may find challenging. So it's really important to be able to anticipate things that your students might struggle with, and non-native speaker teachers are much better at doing that. So Jonathan says being less harsh with students, knowing what they are going through. Yeah, very, very, very important. Another one is the ability to explain grammar. So as one of you already said, non-native speaker teachers are able to explain rules, concepts, and exceptions better than native speaker teachers who simply just have a natural feel. Because as a native English speaker, I didn't really learn grammar. You learn it kind of through immersion. So then often when you ask an English speaker, why did you not use the article in this sentence? Or why do you say going to instead of will? They'll say, I don't know, it just feels right. So they can't actually explain to you. So often it's very difficult for native English speakers to explain those kind of concepts and rules and exceptions. So another one, shared mother tongue. So when non-native speaker teachers share their students' first language, they can first of all build comparisons between the two languages and can also translate when needed. So even knowing a little bit of Korean, I find has helped me in teaching English, because I can see where learners are bringing in things from Korean and translating them directly into English. And I can see where they're making mistakes as a result of the grammar and the vocabulary in Korean. And so knowing the student's language is very beneficial. The next one is brain efficiency. So research shows that people who are bilingual have more efficient brains than monolingual teachers. So I only speak English, and a lot of native speakers only speak English because we're lazy. Okay, we think, oh, we don't need any other language. So we can speak a little bit of some other languages, but not to your level where you speak English as a second language. So for you guys as bilinguals, your brain is a lot more efficient and works better than people like me. Okay, and another advantage is so non-native speakers present an achievable model of English. So often when students have a native speaker teacher, it can be quite intimidating. Oh, this is the level of English I'm expected to reach. So when they have a non-native speaker teacher, it can be less intimidating in order to try to achieve that model of English. And the final benefit is non-native speaker teachers are great role models. So when students see a non-native teacher who can speak English so well that they're able to actually teach the language, it gives them a lot of motivation. Like, wow, if my teacher can do this, I can do it too. So it sets a really good example for the students. So there are so many benefits of non-native English speaking teachers. So good for dementia. Thank you for sharing, Damien. Good to see you. So yeah, that's another benefit. Good for your mental brain health. Awesome. So non-native teachers should try to be very confident in their own abilities, because you guys have so many things to bring to the table, so many benefits. And in the classroom, try to empower students to feel more confident in their English learning. So that goes for both native teachers and non-native teachers. It's something we should all be doing. And we should adjust our instruction to meet our students' language learning needs. So I'm going to be talking a little bit later about how we can tailor our classrooms and our instruction in order to meet students' true needs in terms of learning English. Okay, so students' English speaking reality. So since, as I mentioned earlier, non-native speakers now far outweigh native speakers of English, students are much more likely to speak English with someone for whom English is a second or even a third language. So now in the world, there are so many more non-native speakers of English. So it feels kind of unrealistic or illogical to have students try to learn, for example, American English, when the chances of them having a conversation with an American are a lot less high than with a non-native speaking person. So 4%, this is the amount of communication these days in English language, not involving a non-native speaker. So what this means is that 96% of communication and conversations in English now involve at least one non-native speaker. So the chances are when you and when your students are communicating in English, at least one person in that communication or in that conversation is going to be non-native. So it means that we really need to adjust the way in which we teach English. So how can we meet our learners' needs? We need to prepare students for the reality in which they need to understand and also be understood by speakers of many varieties of English. So it's important for us to help our learners and for you guys to help yourselves. First of all, understand other speakers and also be understood in terms of how you communicate. So how can we do this? The first thing is building awareness. So it's really important to demystify our students' potential prejudices about non-native speaking teachers. So some students, because the native speaker fallacy is just so ingrained in many people, studies have shown that a lot of students have a kind of prejudice against non-native speaking teachers, and parents and recruiters also tend to have this kind of bias. So by discussing with students the characteristics of ideal teachers like we have done, it can increase students' awareness of the skills that successful instructors possess. So instead of going into a classroom feeling in some way inferior, it's important to explain to your students why you make a great teacher and why non-native speakers make great teachers. It's also really important to explain to students that they're likely to encounter many varieties and accents of English. They are not just going to be speaking to British speakers or American speakers. And even when some of my students will say to me, oh, but I'm going to America, so I need to learn how to speak in American English. But even in the USA, there are so many accents and speakers from so many different countries. So even if you go to the USA, the chances are you're going to be having a lot of communication with non-native speakers. So it's really important to explain that to your students and build their awareness. Remind learners that there is no perfect way to speak English. So a lot of students think that native English speakers are kind of the perfect model, but there is no perfect way to speak English. So try to remind your students of that and remind yourself. Be respectful of different accents and make it clear to your student that no one accent is more important or better than the other or more prestigious. So it's important to show your students that you are respectful of different accents and that they are all equal. Next one is help students to view an accent as a valid and valuable part of someone's identity, not a failure or obstacle to overcome. So an accent is part of us, it's part of our identity. So it's really important to get that point across to your students because it can be very harmful if people start to devalue accents. So for example, when I first went to Australia, a lot of people could not understand my accent and they said, what's your first language? They thought I was a non-native speaker. And I would say, my first language is English. And they were very confused. So it really affected my identity. I felt like so hurt and insecure. So it's really important to remember that an accent is an important part of someone's identity. And just because someone speaks with an accent, it's not a failure, okay? It's part of them. And try to appreciate and explain that it is perfectly possible to speak with an accent and be understood at the same time. So a lot of my students are very worried about their accent and think that people can't understand them. It is not the case. So you can have an accent, but you can also be perfectly understood at the same time. And finally, teach students to separate their opinions about a person from their opinions about how they talk. So some people, I guess, when they hear a certain accent or when they hear how someone speaks, they kind of build a judgment in their head. So try to remind your students that it's really important to separate the two. And a good way to do this is to encourage your students to think about people who they consider to be role models. For example, actors, singers, and sports people who speak English as their second or third language. So for example, a famous Korean actor, Chae-Wook-sik, he speaks English very well. And I guess by showing your students images such as these and explaining, okay, he has interviews where he is speaking in English and he is perfectly understood. He has a little bit of an accent, but it doesn't take away from the understanding. Another example, there are a lot of famous people who are non-native speakers. So Arnold Schwarzenegger, who is now the mayor in California in the US, I believe he's still mayor, but he has been able to become a politician in an English-speaking country, and he has reached such a high level of English. Despite having an accent, he is still understood. If you guys watch Modern Family, you'll be familiar with Sofia Vergara from Colombia. So again, a very successful person who is speaking English not as her first language. So it's really important to get that point across to your students that we should respect all accents. An accent isn't a problem. It's just part of us, and that we will still be understood even if we speak with an accent. So building awareness is one of the first and most important solutions to kind of help students adjust to their English speaking reality. Another important thing is to expose your students to different accents. So this is when it comes to listening practice in class. It's really important for students to be exposed to a diversity of speakers, not just a diversity of native speakers, but also skilled non-native speakers. So often if I open a textbook in Korea and I check the audio, all of the speakers are Canadian or American. Okay, so it's really important to first of all expose your students to Australian, New Zealand, British, other first language English speakers, but also non-native speakers who are speaking English well. So it's important when you are giving audios to try to expose your students to different accents. Use authentic recordings. So instead of just ones from textbooks, you can use ones from the internet, which are real life conversations. So spoken English so rarely sounds like the audio featured in popular published textbooks. So it's important to use real life recordings, and you can find a lot of those online. And I'll be introducing you guys to some resources later that you can use. And if you're teaching adult students, it's good to give them a choice about which varieties of English they wish to learn in class according to their needs. So often when we follow the curriculum often goes with either American English or sometimes British English. But if you're teaching adult students, it's good to actually give them a choice. So it's not so easy with kids, but with adults, sometimes if they have a particular goal in mind, it's good to ask them at the beginning of the semester which accents they want to learn. Okay, the next point I want to talk about is pronunciation instruction. So it's also, in addition to being understood, it's really important to help your learners be understood by other people. So the goal of teaching pronunciation is to help students acquire an intelligible, so intelligible means understandable, and functional pronunciation in English, not a native speaker accent, and to become confident in speaking English. So often when I teach pronunciation classes, the students will say, oh, we want to speak like an American, or Kiva, can you help me speak like a British person? I want to speak like someone in Notting Hill. Okay, so this is not a solid goal. The most important thing is to be understood. Okay, so pronunciation classes should concentrate on areas that appear to have the greatest influence on intelligibility. So namely things like stress and intonation. So a lot of teachers will either avoid pronunciation because they are too scared to try to teach it, or else they will focus on individual sounds. But research has shown that the thing that affects understanding the most are what we call suprasegmentals. So for example, if our students are pausing in the incorrect place in a sentence, or stressing the wrong parts of a word or a sentence, or using intonation incorrectly, that affects a listener's understanding more than individual sounds. So especially when you are teaching lower levels, it's more important to focus on areas such as stress, intonation, and pausing than individual sounds, because those are the things that will affect understanding the most. Okay, the next solution I want to introduce is just having fun with accents. So a lot of our students just take pronunciation too seriously, and they get very nervous when it comes to things like their accent. So try to be playful in the classroom. Encourage students to listen to sentences in different accents and try to imitate them, and kind of address the differences and similarities between different accents. And if you join in as a teacher, it can help relieve anxiety and create an atmosphere of exploration and fun. So Sung Soon is saying, I think schools usually want a native speaker. Again, this is very true. And again, this is because so many people are subscribing to this native speaker fallacy. Some of it does, yes, come from parents. A lot of recruiters will automatically also want native speaker teachers. So yeah, it is true that it is still happening a lot. And Jonathan says more than parents, students or recruiters have a lot of stereotypes about English. Okay, so the research I'm doing at the moment is that a lot of students and parents want an American teacher, but they don't know what it is. Studies have shown when they actually listen to different accents, they can't identify an American. Okay, so it comes into accent stereotyping, which is a big problem. Okay, so in your classroom, yeah, try to have fun with accents. And so, for example, for advanced learners, you can play clips and get them to identify the accent. So on YouTube, there are different resources you can use where you can play different clips of audios, speakers talking, and get students to guess which accent it is. So it's all about drawing attention to different accents and getting students to kind of like imitate them and play around with them. So make it a fun learning experience. So we've gone over some of the solutions, and I'm going to go over some recommended resources. So these might be helpful for you guys as English language speakers and also for your students. So I recommend these a lot to my students. So the first one, this is a website called elo.org. This is a great website because it has listening exercises with a variety of topics for all levels. And it features both native speakers and non-native speakers. So you can see on the right side, so there are different topics and different speakers talking about things. And you can see like INT4, which I guess means intermediate 4. And you can see the flag. So you can see which country each speaker is from. So this website has speakers who use English very, very, very well, and they're very fluent and proficient, but a lot of them are second language English speakers. So this is a great website for helping students to practice and adjust to different accents. So it's called elo.org, and you can just search by your student's level. I think you can also search by country. And it usually has some like listening activities, and you can also see the script underneath. So this is great for helping your students with listening. Another great one, this one is better for higher level learners, is TED.com. So I use this, I watch videos on this all the time, and I also use it with my students. So videos can be filtered by both the length and the topic. It features both native speakers and also a lot of skilled non-native speakers of English. And most videos have transcripts in both English and Korean. So here, this is a North Korean person talking about her escape from North Korea, and she's talking in English. So usually the videos are about 5 to 10 minutes long, and you can put the Korean or the English subtitles underneath while you are watching it with your students. So for both you guys and for your students, this is a great website. If you're not familiar with it, there is such a diversity of topics. It's a really good website. Another one is Tunein.com. So this is a free website where you can access radio stations and podcasts from all around the world, and you can filter them by location. So you can search here by location, and you can see podcasts from Africa, Asia, Central America, Europe, North America. So some of these are a little bit more difficult, so they would be more suited for intermediate and more advanced students. So this is another great one, and I use it a lot in my personal life as well as recommending it to students. The next one is Italki. So this is for helping with speaking practice. So this is actually an online paid tutoring service, and teachers can be filtered by price and country of origin. So usually you can see the speaker's country. So here there's a flag. You can watch a demo lesson, and you can also do a trial lesson. So this person's trial, I think this is a native speaker. So you can see that this person teaches English and also Spanish. The hourly rate is 13,000 won, which is very cheap, but you can also do a trial for 7,000 won. Here, this person is from maybe South Africa, and the trial is only like 3,000 won. So this is a really great resource for your students to be able to practice English with, so particularly adults, to practice English with speakers from all different countries. And the final one that I would recommend is Meetup. So Meetup is an international website for people to meet people who have similar hobbies. And there are free language exchanges offered in major cities. So for example, here, this is a very common and very popular language exchange in Seoul. It has over 20,000 members. And if you're not familiar with language exchange, it's usually free, or sometimes the person has to buy like a coffee in a cafe to cover the price. And basically speakers from all different countries meet up. And so for example, if you were to go to a language exchange, maybe you would speak Korean for 50% of the time and English for the other 50% of the time. So it's basically like speakers exchanging their different languages. So I've been to ones before in order to help practice my Korean. So I speak Korean to a Korean person for about 30 minutes, and then they speak English to me for 30 minutes. So this is a great resource, in particular for adult students, if they want to practice speaking English and also hearing English from a variety of different speakers from all over the world. So I think these are useful for both you guys if you want to practice your listening and production a little bit more, but also for your students. Okay, so we have a few minutes left. So does anybody have any questions before we finish? Or would anyone like to, I was hoping we would have more time for you guys to share your experiences, but would anyone like to comment on anything that we have gone over today, or maybe share something that you feel is relevant to today's topic? Okay, so let's see. Jonghae says, could you tell what the difference is between accent and stress in English pronunciation? So stress is related to either word stress. So for example, in English, we usually stress one particular syllable in a word. So for example, banana. So we stress the second syllable. So this is called word stress. And sentence stress is where we usually stress certain words in a sentence. So mainly nouns, adjectives, verbs, and adverbs. So stress relates to how much emphasis we place on certain words in a sentence. So if a speaker stresses a word incorrectly or stresses the unnatural words in a sentence, it can really affect one's understanding, whereas accent is more general. So stress is very specific. Accent refers to how someone speaks, usually in relation to their actual sounds. So for example, in the UK, we usually use an ah sound, whereas Americans would use, so let me think of an example. So I would say my natural accent, have, whereas Americans might say, for example, have. So accent refers mostly to the differences in sounds, particularly vowel sounds, but also consonant sounds as well. So accent just refers to how people from different countries and different regions speak and pronounce, whereas stress is more specific. Okay, I hope that answers your question. So we all have different accents in the world, but most native English speakers will stress words and sentences in the same or similar ways. Does anybody have any other questions or comments? So you can turn on your microphone if you would like, or you can write in the chat bar.
I have some comment.
Yeah, Damien.
Okay, happy Easter. And so, just one thing. I think some of the students, other students, they mentioned about the non-native non-native teachers, and non-native speakers teacher and native speakers teachers. And you actually brought up that the very beginning of the lecture. And the thing is, I think that we are the one who actually kind of create it and or make or give some privilege. I'm not a racist, but we're kind of making or like white privileges. So yeah, I just want to share some opinion, like some parents also like for the customer perspective, and they also seeing that white and then native speaker, they would only want that. But I think that for the culture and then like we actually need to get educated, like how we have value. So that's I just want to share with other students.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. That is so true and so important. So often when people think of a native speaker, that speaker is considered as an image of a white person. And studies have shown, I think it was in Japan, that students considered Black teachers from Canada and North America to be non-native simply because of their skin color. So this is also a big issue in the English language teaching industry, where there's often this image that is promoted that white is better, or that a native English speaker is a white teacher, which is of course completely untrue. So it's also something that definitely needs to be addressed in the English language teaching industry for sure. So yeah, thank you so much for pointing that out, Damien. Would anyone else like to share any comments or any questions?
I live in Central Asia in Kyrgyzstan, and I'm working with my husband in an international NGO. About 30 different nationalities working in our organization throughout the world. So we speak not only, we do have a lot of English speakers from non-native speaker of English. So in order to communicate within us, we have to learn English first. But later, we all say we speak international English, not British, not American, but international language, but also native speaker of English. They also have to learn international language, international English, because there are certain expressions that a native speaker of English doesn't get sometimes. So already we say slow, clearly, try to use simple English, and because good pronunciation and good English is good, but ability of communication is better. Yeah. So we encourage that not only develop your English, but also ability of communication, be able to express your thought and able to communicate with others. That is also more important. And that is also important, to communicate, work together. Yeah. So I would say in the past, because of limitation of lack of opportunity to practice English speaking, we have as a Korean tendency to emphasis on pronunciation, intonation kind of things. But things has been changed last 10 years, 5 years, and people know that there are different accents and of course expressions as well. Yeah. So now and generally international English is accepted. Yeah. So in order to, of course, present clearly, we need to practice, also help students practice English and pronunciation, but also able to get the confidence what they have, plus able to express, communicate the thought that they have. That is more important, I think.
Yeah, that is so true. And as you said, so as the title of this is called English as an International Language. So yeah, it's so important. And there's also a responsibility for native English speakers to adjust their language when they are in a situation. We call it communicative burden. So often the non-native speaker has most of the burden of the understanding, but it's really important for native English speakers to adjust their language when they're speaking to a non-native speaker, which they often do not do. So that's really important. Thank you so much for sharing. And so Jonathan just shared the EPIC website, so the public school website. Yeah, so in Korea, as I mentioned earlier, you must be from one of the 7 native speaking countries in order to be recruited as a teacher in Korea. So thank you for sharing that. So Ji Young says, I think we still have a long way to go. I used to work for a company with 157, wow, different nationalities, and the US accent was kind of useless. But how many people would have that opportunity? Yeah, thank you so much for sharing, Ji Young. And okay, great. Thank you so much. So I think I have to join another meeting for the student council now. So unfortunately, I will have to end the meeting. I would love to talk all day about this, but thank you guys so much for joining. If you guys have any questions or anything at all, please feel free to email me. My email, I'm sure if I've taught you before, you will have my email, and it's also on the graduate school website. So thank you so much for joining today. I really appreciate it, and have a great weekend and take care. Thanks so much, guys. Good to see you.
Yeah.